All right, let's get going, huh?
Let's go, gather up. Come on now. All right, fellas, you gotta remember your body is like day-old rice. If it ain't warmed up properly, something real bad can happen. Yeah?
Athletes, take your mark, get set. It's time for the Addict to Athlete podcast. Everybody out there, Coach Blue Robinson here. Hey, I want to thank you all so much for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. Greatly appreciate you guys doing so. As always, keep an eye on the website, addicttoathlete.org. You're going to find all of our backlog content, information about recovery, how to build a foundational team recovery support system, and really just kind of giving you that starting line to a new sober you. Athletes, on that website, you'll see that we have both of our races open. Our team half marathon, the No One Left Behind in June, and the Proxy Recovery Run in September. Those registration pages are both open. Jump on, get your teams together, and let's go run for a reason. Well, Athlete's got a great guest in studio today. I'm excited to talk to him because he's got a unique story and a passion that he's been able to create out of just that continuing cycle of not letting society or the man, so to speak, tell you no. Clay Hodges, I'm excited to have you here. I've been watching and following some of your social media content. Welcome to the podcast. I'd love for you to maybe introduce yourself to the listener base and maybe give a little bit of background and history, and then we'll get into how you turned literally your mess into your message.
Cool. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I don't even know really where to start on the road to recovery other than like for if there is a lot of new people in recovery, which you told me it's all ranges, people listening to this. Now, when I was first in, say, AA, I did all the programs, and I'm still, all about them in their own ways. But I was the guy who kept going to treatment, would get like 30 days, would get like 60 days, would, get a year a few times, and then self-sabotage my way back into a different position to where I was like, damn, how did I end up here again? Right. And I distinctly remember one of the times that I was in treatment, and like, I had a pretty good upbringing. My parents, I was super blessed, and they helped me out a bunch, and then a little bit less, and then a little bit less. And then, the quality of the detoxes and everything kept going down to the point where, like, one of the best things they ever did was like, sorry, we can't help you anymore. And that was like one of the things where I was like, oh man, all right, I got to do this is up to me. Right. And that's when I started to really turn to God and spirituality. But I remember one of the times I was in a treatment center. This was in Kentucky, where I'm from. So very good old boy people, a lot of, people that were in there for opiates and meth and that kind of thing. And the assignment for the day was like, I'd been there for about 6 days. And it was like, write your life story, which everybody knows that one, right? If you've been if you've gone through this. And then, like, at this point, I'd been into treatment and like more times than I'd like to admit or probably can remember. And there's this dude that was there. His name was Ernest. I remember it. And he was like this redneck from Kentucky, from the backwoods. I'm like, Ernest, you ready to tell us your story, man? He's like, I don't even know my story anymore. And I was like, man, that like hit me so hard, because then I realized, like, neither do I. Like, this has been going on so long. And of course, Ernest was like, I don't know, my guess would be like 60, 65. And he'd been in there doing like Dilaudids and all that stuff that, what I was getting into, and had a hold on me. And then, like, it hit me so hard. I was like, man, I'm going to be Ernest. That's going to be my story, where I don't even remember my story because I've been doing this for 50 years. Right. So that wasn't like, of course I did go back out after that. Right. But like, so, but that I will never forget, because I think recovery, you get these little messages and where, God speaks to you through other people, and, gives, and if you have the awareness, maybe not even at the time, the awareness isn't there, but when you think about it later and you're like, man, that guy Ernest in treatment said was super, super, super profound, right? And I remember, I'll never forget that. And I think most people on the journey have those type of like white light moments, where it's not like so much as like, Bill W. in a hospital bed having a white light moment, but it's just like the way somebody else speaks to you along the path that is kind of like, leading you down the path, almost like, in video games back, like, Super Nintendo, and you would meet somebody along the way, and they would give you a little tip, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I'm supposed to go that way." It's kind of like that. So yeah, I grew up in Kentucky, and my story is probably very similar to most people. You know, the opioid epidemic when that first started, when I came into uh, high school in the '90s, when that was first like really starting to pick up, and I did my first Oxycontin when I was like 15, Percocet and all that stuff, and that was the it wasn't like game on from that point. It took a while to get there, but that was kind of normalized, like those type of super strong opiates and stuff like that. And so fast forward a little bit later, car wreck. So then I had, pretty much a free ticket to go get them myself from doctors. And then that roll just picked up momentum into everything else, under the sun. Eventually, whatever I get my hands on. So that's my war story, and with like a million war stories in between there. But that was, and then so my last moment was 2020. So that's when I've been clean right after COVID happened. I had a good stretch of sobriety, and then, went back home, and by home meaning to Kentucky, to stay with my parents, because I was like, oh, I'm going to take care of them, because nobody knew what was going on, and relapse for a short amount of time. Like, I'm talking like a week, and that was like the last time, thankfully, and something shifted
Yeah.
after that completely.
I like that, because it does happen. And as a mental health therapist, and when I coach some of the athletes in their early in recovery, we talk about that specifically, that there's these epiphanies, these aha moments that we have, and we jump on board with sobriety. And then sometimes we get stuck kind of back in our old situations. And, I don't really call it relapse as much as something like a slip at first, which is an acronym for sobriety lost its purpose, SLIP. And sometimes that happens. And a slip is different than a relapse in my mind's eye, because yeah, if your sobriety loses its purpose and you're going to rebound into whatever, substance of choice that gets you through the situation you're experiencing, and you recognize it and you pull yourself out and reestablish the purpose, you're back on track. That relapse is back on the grind again. It turns back into your addiction. So I do understand those kind of things, because yeah, it's a little different when you make big changes like that. Sometimes we're not prepared as we think we are. But it sounds like somehow you reestablished your purpose in recovery. Does that kind of play true to you, and how you recognize that, man, I can't be doing this, I've got to be taking this path? Did you reestablish purpose, and if so, how?
It was so, without getting to too many nitty gritty details, but in the town I grew up, the opioids became the norm, and then I left. I was like, I got to get out of here, and then started my extracurricular journey, and then eventually turned into my recovery journey, which started in 2012. Uh, then so a lot of time, in and out. Before that, then I, like I said, was had it for a bit, and then what happened is I went back home, and all the people I grew up with, the ones that weren't dead or in jail, are on methadone. So like I ran into an old friend at the gas station, and he just said he was leaving the clinic, and I don't know, I just was like, oh really? And then that's kind of started that, and then 5 days later it's just like a mess, right? So it was a wake up call. Now I think one of the things though that I realized was that, like, what kept me in and out and sick for a long time was I was comparing my journey to other people, comparing, my sobriety to other people, comparing it to, it has to be XYZ in a certain program, right? Which I do agree with in a lot of ways. But the thing is like, if it doesn't have to, it can be my own, which can incorporate, fitness, health, yoga, mindset, entrepreneurship, even. I don't have to, because I was a square trying to be fit into a round hole for a long time, and then I wouldn't quite fit. I would fit in there for a minute, but it wasn't aligned. And so once I really started to get myself seeking more alignment within myself, rather than like checking the check boxes of recovery, that's when, more
Yeah.
magic started to happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how soon after that reawakening and kind of getting yourself pulled back up onto that path that you wanted, did you start kind of broadening your horizon? Because I think a lot of times early in recovery, we get in these things where we think we can do anything, but then we talk ourselves out of everything because, what if I fail? What if I start down this path and I suck at it? Any kind of like, positioning, career choices, anything like that has the potential of risk for us to throw in the towel because it's not coming easy. But it sounds like you found something that not only drew your attention, but that you started becoming really good at. Tell the listeners a little bit about this new path that once you had that clear mind and a fresh view, that you were able to kind of start looking at like through the lenses of, I can succeed at this.
Oh, right. Like, are you talking about like trading and entrepreneurship and that?
Yeah, your entrepreneurship, yeah, everything, just your mindset and everything. Because I think it all kind of encapsulates in this awakening of like, I don't have to just settle for this life.
So a big shift, and I was listening to somebody talking about this other day too, and it's funny because it was like the shift that I made within myself is like, instead of asking myself, what if I do this, like, and it doesn't work out, the real question is like, what if I don't do it, right? So like, what if you don't do recovery? Well, you know what that's going to be like. What if you do it? It's going to be hard, sure, but if you don't do it, it's you don't have a life anymore, right? So there's that, all the way up to like, you know, wanting to get fit. Easiest example, and this is what I talk about a lot because it's the shortest measuring time. Say if you wanted to learn a new skill or like be an entrepreneur or trading like that I got into, it takes a long time to learn. You might have some success overnight, but like beginner's luck is one thing, then being successful is a different thing. But going to the gym, dedicating yourself to that within like, especially once you start to get clean, right? I think we are talking about it before this, my journey into sobriety and getting clean, like at first it was very much like everybody else. And I think it was the path I had to go on, is in a halfway house, got a job doing construction. Just like my goal at the time was just like, don't use no matter what. And this was like previous to the 2020 incident. But, so like from there, then I fell into a path of feeling kind of unfulfilled. And I started to fill that with healthy habits like, fitness and yoga. So yoga and meditation, which I think, the overarching theme of pretty much any recovery program is a connection with a higher power. And, you can find that in so many ways. You can find it within ourselves and our connection to nature and God and the universe, and the way you feel, and you're looking at the stars at night, right? And there's got to be something more than this than just me. So rewind to when I was just trying to get my body back, which is, I think, is like, I know for myself, put it through hell and back. So getting into the gym was very, very hard for me at first. But within 30 days, if you go and dedicate, the first week sucks. You're super sore, everything else. But if you dedicate yourself to it for 30 days, 60 days, you actually see a real difference and an impact, and you feel better. And it's like the reward system's actually happening. So now that's a longer journey when we're talking about emotional health or uh, mental health. And then, because you start to feel better, but to where you really start to feel stable, I look at it as like a ladder. Physical being like the baseline, almost like the base of a pyramid, then mental health, emotional health, spiritual health. And then once you can kind of, and this is just my journey and experience, once I started to get those kind of in alignment, then what I wanted to do from like a financial standpoint and building personal brand online, trading, became a lot more effortless because I'm aligned in these other areas of life. Like I'm doing the things that I need to do for myself on a daily basis to get me to where, like, the things that I can control, I'm in control of. And then once that's stable, we all have a calling, so figuring out what that is number one. And then, starting to explore it. When I had pretty much zero interests other than like partying and using while I was doing that. Right. So like I had a few sports, skiing. I love to ski. I went to college in Colorado. But once I started using, that became non-existent. So getting back into those things was massive. And then it built a belief system that there's more to life. And like we were talking about before we started, like once I just kind of operate on the mindset of like once I was a junkie at the bottom, overdosing in bathrooms, which is what happened, which is like where my story got really dark. That just became like a recurring thing. Once you've already make it out of that, you might as well go for it, because you're living on God's time, and we all have a deeper purpose, and that's basically to create our own best version of ourselves and share it with other people that are earlier on in that journey.
Yeah, yeah. I love the fact that you kind of started the ladder and that foundation with the physical attributes, and specifically with yoga. Yoga, I used to think, oh, whatever, how stupid, until I realized how much strength it takes, how much balance needs to be applied. And I think about balance in recovery, in life in general. I mean, you think about balance, definition loosely, the distribution of weight, enabling someone or something to remain upright and steady. And yoga kind of puts you in that physical balance, where you got to start really concentrating. But once you start letting yoga work for you instead of you trying to work it yourself, some cool things start to happen, with alignment and stability and equilibrium and footing and all kinds of stuff. And I love the fact that that's kind of how you set that foundation. Because really, without balance in any of this, too much of anything can make us an addict again. So I'm curious, as you started to kind of create this balance, what kind of improvements did you see, not just in like your own mental and physical and emotional well-being, but the people around you too? Like, man, he's kind of got a foundation now. I mean, you had to have had family members and friends that were like, dude, he's doing it. Like, I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing it. Did people start to notice that like you seem to start to have some synergy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like the same, what I talked about earlier, I wasn't allowed at my family's place anymore. Of course, that's all changed, and I'm super proud, right? And that was ultimately, that's probably all I ever wanted, was to make them proud of me. So it didn't come in the form that I thought it might, or, that I was like kind of conditioned to think it should, which is like, being a doctor or whatever, right? Like you think that that's would make them proud, but really it's like coming into my own and ultimately, getting clean. They couldn't be any more proud of anything else. And the thing is like, if you're listening to this and you're struggling, there's not a bigger thing that you could do with your life than kicking drugs and alcohol and really becoming the person you were meant to be. Like that is the best thing that you could possibly do, because there are, for every one person that does that, there's going to be, at this rate, like 50 people that don't, or 95, right? So if you're looking at 1 to 100, that's kind of pretty accurate. So if you can go out and do that, and then we become assets to our community, other people. And with that stability that you had asked about, it's more about, I just wanted to feel comfortable in my own skin. Like the reason I would pop Xanax is so I could just like not think about myself, or like, not be self-conscious or anxious or whatever. I just wanted to feel comfortable in my own skin. And it takes longer to do that with a system like yoga, but it's infinitely more fulfilling in this, and actually brings stability, as opposed to, well, that would turn me into a monster, like quite literally. So yeah, so the stability thing, I'm getting to where I feel comfortable in my own skin. I don't need somebody else or other people or entertainment to like complete me. I can just, more or less like enjoy sitting.
Exactly. But I also believe that, and a lot of folks in recovery have a hard time with this, but I've noticed that so many people I've worked with in the 20 years of being a mental health therapist, working specifically with addictions, that these guys are the most intuitive. Like they can become so focused and so ripe with success if they'll allow those attributes to become balanced. And I mean this in the most humble way, because you're an entrepreneur. You've kind of created your own, and I think that people with addictions have the most amazing ability to be creators. I mean, do you remember, Clay, back in the day when you had no money, you had no means to get whatever substance you needed, but somehow by the end of the day, you had what you were looking for? Yeah, maybe the means to get it weren't the best, but like you created that out of nothing. And I think that when we flip the script and we teach these folks that you can do amazing things using the same principles in a positive way, there's nothing you can't do. You are problem solvers. You are go getters. You can become hyper focused. Those are all the qualities of an amazing entrepreneur, because you're kind of used to the hustle. So when you flip the script from that negative to the positive, what's possible? Tell me a little bit about that, because I see what you're doing, and you're creating all this stuff through your investments of your time, your energy, your focus, your resource. What's it like being an entrepreneur with a background of like, I'm going to get what I want because I kind of know how to do it now. I broke the system. I broke the code.
Well, I mean, that's definitely true. Back when I was using, if I was like, in the middle of a cornfield in Kansas, like, and wanted to get high, I would have figured out like, I would have, it would have had like, I would have just like manifested it. Some like, I'd meet some
Yep.
corn dweller and like, it would have happened. Like it was crazy. So, I think that like, there's no doubt that being, that type of energy, being an addict is a certain type of person that we have access to something and a level of empathy and intuition that I would, say most people don't. And it's a gift and it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, like that same level of being able to feel and the empathy and, like I don't know if I was just overly sensitive, but I always just felt things way more than other people. And I think that uh, that was one of the reasons why I probably used. Now, fast forward, it's made me a really great communicator, and I can talk to most people, like or like because I dropped the masks, or at least I'm constantly trying to, right? I was always trying to be something that I wasn't when I was using. And, once I got clean, had to figure out, okay, well, what am I actually all about? And who am I? And what have I done? And then like coming to terms with that actually becomes an asset. What was my biggest liability is now my biggest asset, because I can, talk to other people about that, or at least, um, if somebody wants to tell me something or like need somebody to talk to, I can 100% be like, look, man, I've either already done it or thought about it. And so like, let's just talk about whatever it is that you want to share, and I can legitimately say that to other people. It creates a safe space. So how do I, channel that into entrepreneurship? I think it just gives me a unique perspective on life, because I also know that I don't know everything because I've had to go through that darkness. So I'm not like a big part of me getting clean was leveling my ego, where it's a lot of people that would be, say, in an entrepreneurship type position, have a ton of ego, and you're like, geez, man, he's super successful, but he can't stand the guy, right? Or whatever. I think it's just a different perspective. Everybody's different, but it's like the biggest thing that I can say is what was my biggest liabilities was my biggest assets. And the thing is, and the fact that that's all rooted in a belief in God and the spirit, and my relationship with that. At the end of the day, I know it's going to be all right, because most days I'm pretty in tune with that. As long as I can stay in tune with it, I know that I'm going to be taken care of, because I was always taken care of, even when I was like basically on the streets. So for whatever reason, and I'm still here after overdoses and being in super, super, super sketchy situations, coming out the other side of that. So, and that one, like, I was in a treatment center one time, and this guy, this one was in Tennessee. I'd always go to these backwood places, treatment centers, And those are the best ones. This was like an all male one in Tennessee, and it was super strict AA type like boot camp pretty much. And there was this old timer there. His name was Joel, and we were going over like the third step. And the thing was is like I would just like so hard on myself to the almost to the being a victim about it pretty much. And he's like, Clay, I got one question for you. And I was like, what, Joel? Like, because I was just like, walking around, huge cloud over me, not just frowning and just pissed off at myself. Couldn't believe I was in this same position again. And he's like, when are you going to take yourself off that cross, man? Because everybody else is waiting for you to come down. And that was I started crying, had this huge heart opening experience. And because he was so right, like me beating myself up about my past was the thing that was just keeping me just so sick like a dog, just like and which kept me running back to the same habits. So the fact that I have let go of that through the process of getting clean and getting in touch with a higher power, which all the stuff that I talked about was yoga, fitness, mindset, all these things. At the end of the day, as long as I do that and stay on that, then things are going to happen positive for me. So and
I love it.
again, those what was my biggest liabilities are assets, and gives me the ability to connect with people.
Yeah, well, you touch a chord with me when you talked a little bit about that people with addiction, they feel deeper. There is this strange kind of empathy that most of the general public would think, baloney, because everyone that's listening to this podcast has someone that struggles with addiction in their family. I mean, you go to any person randomly in that cornfield, that you talk about, and you say who in your family's addicted or whatnot, and they'll tell you that they have a family member that is. But what I've noticed, man, over all these years of doing this is that I think people with addictions, they have really big hearts that feel immense pain. And when we come across people that have pain, we want to take it from them. So we'll carry it for them. And so I love the fact that you recognize that part, because that could be the most devastating attribute to have when you're in addiction, because you're carrying everyone else's pain, your family trauma, everyone else's stuff. You don't have time for yours. And so when you start unpacking everyone else's stuff and you start working on yours finally, then you can become aware enough. You had to jump off that cross, so to speak, and start doing some self-forgiveness. How hard was that journey for you to kind of like finally say, you know what, looking yourself in the mirror and say, Clay, I forgive myself, right? Like, those moments are amazing. Did you have that?
Yeah, for sure. And like it's over time, it becomes like, damn, I can be like, I've done some cool stuff. I can't believe and then I was actually becoming proud of who I am. And it was a whole different, thing, which I never was. No matter what, no matter how many teacher was like, oh, you're doing great, but you got so much potential, just unwasted, unmet potential. I heard that a lot. Right. So, all the time. And I think that, and I've heard that in multiple treatment centers. It's like a theme, because like most addicts, alcoholics are pretty smart people. Not, I mean, but I think generally there's like a higher just ability to feel. And, I think again, that's just like something that we look at as a bad thing, which is really like one of our strengths.
For sure.
So
yeah. But see, here's the thing too that I like about what I see you doing. And in 2011, when I started Addict to Athlete, one of our main core functioning like principles was we're no longer anonymous. I was kind of done with the anonymity of this, because anonymity keeps people sick, and in 2024 it'll kill you. And so when I start seeing like social media really start taking off, and I start seeing these sober communities, these sober folks that are kind of promoting their recovery and how they got there, man, I love that so much, because that's the old school thinking of like AAs and anonymous. I understand why it was important back then. But now I love the fact that I can jump on any social media platform and come across stuff like that you're doing. And so when I start hearing people advocate for their recovery, that are willing to get out there to the mass millions and say, hey, I've had an addiction and I've struggled, and this is how I've done it. That is the most amazing thing. Tell me about that reason you found it important to start like advocating recovery through your social media. Because, dude, you roll back the clock again 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I first started this whole program, we got so much hate mail because you're doing it wrong. You're hurting these people. You're exposing them. And I'm like, are you kidding me? They have superpowers. Tell me why it was important for you to start advocating your sobriety through your efforts on social, because that lets a lot of people in your window.
Yeah, for sure. I love that question, right? So like I think, man, I really don't have a choice. And that sounds and the reason I don't have a choice is, I I alluded to it earlier, but I've overdosed so many times and woke up in the hospital. Shouldn't be here, right? But by the grace of God and all that, I am. So like there's no it would be so extremely selfish of me not to. And I actually wrestled with that for quite a while, and started trying to make money online, and starting the entrepreneurship journey, and actually never really talked about it because I didn't think that I was qualified. And the reason I didn't think I was qualified is because I was trying to compare my journey in recovery and journey with drugs and alcohol to some old timer in AA with 20 years. Or like, it's like, okay, maybe when I get there, then I can like, start talking about it and helping people. And that's just not true, right? Because like nobody knows how long we're going to be here. And that just seems way too far off, right? So like once I had that episode that I alluded to, and then after about a year and a half, and I really something shifted in me to where I felt just called that I have to do this because fentanyl, people are just it's the worst epidemic that we have by far. It's the one that people talk about. It might become like a talking point for on TV or in politics, but nobody's doing anything about it. So the fact that I lived through that and came out the other side, have a daily process that I do, I have to share that with other people because it might save somebody's life. And like, it's not that I particularly want to. I'm starting to enjoy it now because I connect with people. But like on my Instagram, one of the pinned pictures is my before and after picture where I'm wearing the same shirt. I was at my parents' house for Christmas, found the shirt that like I'd overdosed in the bathroom in Walmart in Colorado. Woke up basically on an ambulance, and then got taken to jail. I have this old flannel shirt on in the picture that just looks like just dirty and everything else that you'd imagine. And I found it in my closet at my parents' house, and I was like, "Holy crap!" Because I know they took a picture of me. Yeah, they took a picture of me to like book me and everything else. I have that picture, and it's very, it just doesn't look like me. It's very, because it wasn't me, but it was very gruesome. Anyway, so I put that shirt on and had my brother take a picture of me with it, this past Christmas. It's like before and after. And I don't necessarily like, it I was battling with, should I share this for a long time? For what are people going to say, this and that. And man, I got so much love for that post. And, that I was being self-conscious about my own insecurities rather than like, as soon as I started to tell my story, just a flood of love and reception came because like people are longing for that type of authenticity right now because the world is very fake and contrived. I don't even know how to say it. So if you have a story and you're listening to this, you have a story that you can share with somebody else. And so it's getting ourselves out of the way. And the more that I do that, funny enough, better things start to happen in my life. So it's not like it comes with the flip side of that. The more I tried to hide my life, hide who I was, hide what I was doing, the worst things started happening to me, right? Like, and I didn't feel good about myself, and it's a very negative energy, right? So that journey has been, and ultimately to answer your question, super freeing, very freeing, because I was like, yeah, I mean, like the secrets keep us sick, which is so true. And so like trying to hide that and just making it like a secondary thing when really it's the biggest thing that's ever happened to me, going through that like is was very liberating for sure.
Man, see, I love that. And again, you keep touching base on things that just are just really genuine to my heart, my mission. And years ago, I was listening to like speaker. It was the president of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and funny enough, like the president of Mothers Against Drunk Driving was a guy, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. Like what? But he said something that I have really just nilled over my mind for the last 20 years. And he says there's this thing called the rule of thirds. And he says, and I was a brand new counselor, right? I was a substance abuse counselor, and I'm like, I'm going to save the world. This is like year 2000, right? And he said 1/3 of everyone that struggles with addiction, they're going to find their solution and they're going to make it. They'll never look behind them. That rear view mirror will stay in their background, and they'll never go back. He says, but the next third will be in and out of jail, in and out of rehabs, and they'll have problems their whole life. They'll have periods of clean time and periods of success, but then they'll always kind of find a way back. I'm like, yeah, that kind of sucks. And they said, the third dies. And this is in 2000, man. And this is like right before a lot of the overdose stuff started really kicking off. I mean, we were about 10 years removed from that yet. And I remember thinking 2/3 of that really suck. Like either you're in and out of jail and rehab or you're dead. Only 1/3. And I thought there's no way that's true. But over the last, 24 years since I've been doing this, it's very true. So I look at your story and I'm hearing like these near-death experiences that you had, and the fact that you understand that there's a strong spiritual connection that you have with your higher power that's trying to keep you here for a reason. When you started wrapping your head around that, how did that change your perspective on what you could do? Because obviously you've got a mission here. You've got something that you've got to be doing. You got to be teaching people you have to meet, people you got to inspire. That has to be an incredible weight on your shoulders. At the same time, like an awareness that higher power is very aware of you and you're not getting out that easy. Like he wants you to get busy. How hard was it to kind of accept that as kind of like, oh, I guess I better get this rock a rolling?
Well, I think our true purpose in life is to connect with God. We are here so we can get back to our truest essence, which is in vibrating along with that same frequency, so to speak. So, it's not so much like this is like a burden I have to bear, rather than like it's our everybody's on that same journey going back home, with home being God. So, for us, for me, but everybody has a different path to get there. Mine was heroin and speed. So, and that's what's going to get it's a fast track to find it. You're either going to or going to suffer, and I think so. Like, it's not. This was another thing that kept me sick, was like I was trying to compare my conception of that to books and everything else, rather than on an intellectual, how am I going to figure this thing out, rather than like how am I just going to let go and look and long to experience it. The more I was just like, how can I open myself up to experience it, which happened through more or less acceptance, then uh, it was much easier to connect. And, it's not like if somebody doesn't believe that, or they're not quite there yet, they're not wrong either. But, I think we're going to find ourselves there one way or the other. And it's a huge reservoir for strength. I think that in our culture, it's been like kind of systematically removed in a way that like, but the pendulum is swinging back to where people understand that there's more to life than just material and jobs and doing what you went to school for. It's we have a bigger purpose to connect with something larger than ourselves. And the whole, if we're talking about like AA and recovery, it's just what they talk about being an altruistic movement, and it's based on helping those around us. And I think that humanity in itself is one, not to sound too philosophical. So it's yeah. So it's that's a tough question, really. But like for me, it's just figuring out that, or accepting that that was the true purpose. Anyways, I was just running from it. I was just trying to find a connection with God through like drugs,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as
having like a spiritual
so many
experience at a
think is
concert.
possible.
I did all
Mm-hmm.
that.
Absolutely, man. But
Yeah.
that's what I love about what you're doing, and even like I've watched your social media content, been following you for a little while now, and I think one of the scariest things that people in recovery have to understand is this relationship with money and finances, and that's why when I started hearing, because you're doing something a little bit unique with your trading and stuff, and I've talked to folks that have had behavioral addictions that have become so addicted to that they get themselves in trouble, and so as I was watching you and listening to some of the principles that you're kind of giving out to the world that will listen, I'm noticing like you're not using that as a mechanism for superiority. You're using it as a teaching mechanism to create a living. And I'm kind of blown away by that, man, because an addict's relationship with money is a scary one, right? I had an athlete of mine years ago that wasn't ready when she got back out into the real world to have cash on hand. And all of a sudden she's working as a waitress and she has money and she's like, ooh, that was a trigger. And we ended up losing her. She passed away from an overdose because she had instant access to cash. That relationship, I think, is so challenging. How are you not allowing that to become a trigger? I mean, how do you use it to be your benefit and to kind of create versus using it as a mechanism for a death sentence? Does that make sense? I think our relationship with money is kind of messed up in the addiction world.
Yeah, totally. And look, I'm not like an accountant or Warren Buffett too. Like, I'm not. I'm still figuring like my credit score. I had to work it back from like 300 or something like that. So like, it's been a learning process. I didn't wake up like just being a wizard at that. But I realized that like I wanted money. I didn't have any, and the reason I didn't have any is because I knew nothing about it. So like I think it's different if you were going to go try to enter into that and like actually learn how can I access it, one, and because the framework's not the same as when our parents grew up. It's very different. So figuring out what you are good at and creating that as a service to offer the world, then that's like your becomes your own uh you know business or enterprise. So, I just kind of I don't even know how I got into trading. I mean, I do, but like it was very weird. And like, I just honestly wanted to figure out a way how to make money online. And then I set that intention, started reading books and, a lot of trial and error. But, that started in 2017. So it wasn't an overnight thing either. I just was like, I'm not going to give up. Right. And so here I am. And so, like, that's it. And like, so many times I got discouraged. And like I said, I even relapsed. And me not wanting to share that with people too previously was something that kept me going out. So, like, that is part of the journey. I mean, it doesn't have to be anybody's part. Don't make that as an excuse to be like, well, I haven't done that yet. So, but yeah, so but the money piece is as long as I'm in alignment, short answer to your question, as long as I'm in alignment with the other things that I'm doing, which is physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health, then the money piece is more manageable, because I'm aligned in these other places, and then I can just see that as what it is, rather than like if I'm all over the place over here and emotionally all over the place, and not taking care of myself, then yeah, it's a bad idea. And I have actually you know blown a lot of money too, learning how to trade and not being aligned. And so that was the early part of my journey. So, but I share about that as
I
well.
love it, man. So I'm looking behind you, see all those books and whatnot. Tell me a little bit about a book that you would recommend that someone that's gonna start early in recovery, or just need to be inspired, need to get some wind beneath their wings. What book would you rep to them to say, hey, give this a look? It might really change your life.
I would probably go with this one right here, polishing the mirror. Ram Dass, polishing the mirror. Ram Dass is just an awesome book. I think I read this in man, I guess 2016. And that just really got me more just thinking bigger about life, and meditation and yoga and spirituality. And like, again, it doesn't have to look like anybody else's. It can which is what they say in that, which is super profound, and it's a super easy read. So I would
That's
say
cool.
Polishing the Mirror. It's one of my favorite books.
Dude, I haven't heard of that. I'm gonna look that puppy
Polish
up.
it, dude. Let me know what you think about it, for
I
sure.
most certainly will, brother. So as we wrap kind of up, though, I would love to like get you some traffic over to what you're doing, because I've been watching you for a while, and I think your content is solid. I love your principles. I love just that welcoming atmosphere that you create. How do people out there in the internet world, that world wide web, how do they find you? What avenues can we use to get a hold of you?
Yeah, for sure. And like, my Instagram, probably the best place to just kind of see what I have going on. And, it's interesting because I did start to get some success with trading and all that. But if you watch my videos, it's just like, that's kind of how I kind of get people in. And then I just talk about how to make it through life and finding your purpose and, recovery and like, like more deeper things, because my belief is as long as you can get that tapped in and tapped into that, then like you can do whatever it is that you want to do. So, I'm not here to pitch a program or anything like that. But if I do this out of like, I feel it just helps me, to be honest. So, but you can find me. My Instagram is clay.b.hodges. It's a verified account. That there's probably a couple of them out there, but the one that's verified, and shoot me a message if you like this podcast and you're like, man, I love what you're talking about. I'd love to hear from you.
We'll make sure that those are all in the show notes, listeners, because I think Clay's got a heart that beats in the same rhythm that I think will resonate with a lot of our listeners, but also just your genuine like desire to want to just share and give back. I think that resonates really well, and you're doing a great job. But brother, yeah, this probably won't be the only time we touch base, because the time goes by pretty quick. I've got a lot more questions, but nonetheless, brother, yeah, let's get some traffic out there, and we'd love to probably do this again, just because I know there'll be folks that will somehow connect with what you've said today. So listeners, we'll put Clay's information in the show notes. Again, I want to thank everyone who downloads and shares this. Keep this one kind of like in the rotation, because some of the principles you've heard today, they're coming from a genuine place of wanting you to succeed. So don't think that there's anything out there you can't conquer. So athletes, again, do your best. Thanks so much for listening, and do your best to turn your mess into your message.